بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. The hadith is proof itself in beliefs and laws. By Sheikh Nasruddin Al-Albani. Introduction by Muhammad Eid Al-Abbasi. الحديث حجة بنفسه في العقائد والأحكام للشيخ ناصر الدين الألباني مقدمة محمد عيد Al-Abbasi. This book review, or this episode of the book review, Hadith Disciple book review, is we're fulfilling a request of one of the Hadith disciples. We were asked to make a study and a review of this book. The Hadith is proof itself in belief and laws. That's the title of the book. And before we get started with the general information and the general background of the book, we would say that the book is a translation of an original book in Arabic, as we've read the title. It's a translation of an original book or work in the Arabic language. And before we get started with any other points or general pieces of information on the book, we would say the book is highly informative. It is very beneficial. It's a good read. And the topic of the book, the subject matter of the book, is something which is of crucial importance in the world that we live in today, in 2015. Crucial importance. Walhamdulillah. So we have a good outlook on the book. And what we're speaking about primarily is not the book in Arabic. Whereas these book reviews are not designed first and foremost for Arabic books. Even though there's been a few books that we've had reviewed and studied in brief or just recommended. But the critical reviews, the critical study, the pros, the cons, the sins of the book, the authors, that is designated for books that are in the English language. Books that are in the English language. And then whenever we review any of these types of books or these type of works here, it's going to be dealing with the style of translation and how does the Muslim who reads the English language, studious, layman, whatever the case, how do they benefit from it in the English language? That's the primary goal. There are some issues that we may tackle, we may discuss, even in Arabic, in the original Arabic context. But the original primary goal is books that are in English. So that is something to be kept in mind, bidnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the general purpose, and specifically for no one to say, how can this person come and now he's critiquing Sheikh Al-Albani, and he's attacking the book of Sheikh Al-Albani, and so on and so forth. Because many people, they say these types of slanderous statements and claims, not to say that we care or it concerns us, but just for there won't be any type of misconceptions or ambiguity whatsoever. Khair, inshallah. Let's move on. Unfortunately, and this is one of the sins of the book, there isn't no printing information available. We don't have any information available on when and where the book was printed. All right, we have the general information about the book, whereas this is a photocopy. This is a photocopy of an older print of the book, which I believe was made by a Dar of Islamic Heritage. A Dar of Islamic Heritage. If my memory serves me correctly, I've had the book before, the original translation. This is a photocopy of it, whereas this one is printed by Premier Book Center, New Delhi, India. Premier Book Center, New Delhi, India, and it is Allahu Alam if I can say stolen, but it's definitely a photocopy of the original publication of the book in English. And it's a big possibility that the book was actually stolen and photocopied and reprinted without dealing with the author or the translator or the original publisher's explicit permission. So this book is printed in India, and we say that it was made by a Dar of Islamic Heritage publication. The exact date is unknown. It's unknown. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe it was printed in, let's say, definitely I would say the 90s, anywhere from early to mid 90s when the book was originally translated and published in English. Khairan, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The book's origin is a lecture that was given by Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah in Granada, Spain on the 8th of August 1972. So the original book is not actually a book, but it was a lecture, and it's very, very old. A lecture that Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah gave to some students of knowledge and some aware, conscious Muslims in Spain in the 70s. So that is a good piece of information about the book. Gives us some richness of its history, some style, and some class of the actual book. Khairan, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, we don't have no printing information available in this copy. It says table of contents, opening statement, introduction, terminology of hadith. Chapter 1, the necessity of adhering to the sunnah and forbidding define it. Chapter 2, correct hadith cannot be abandoned for qiyas. Chapter 3, ahad hadith must be accepted in matters of aqidah. Chapter 4, taking taqleed as the accepted religion. Then there is the opening statement, as I just said, and the author, he mentions those chapters, and there are many chapter headings or bullet points or bulletin points throughout the book. So the title of the book, we say, is relatively clear, and to some people it may not be that clear. It says that the hadith, that's what it says in English. That's not necessarily the most sound translation, let alone English style. The hadith, we would say hadith, or we would say hadiths, because in the Arabic language when we say al-hadith, it is a specific meaning and usage. It's some jins. Alright, so we would say hadiths are proofs, or they're proof in by themselves in belief and in laws. Alright, that's what's more sound, but that's what it says. The hadith itself is proof itself in belief and laws. In other words, the author wants to speak on the fact and the reality that a hadith is a dalil. A hadith is a hujjah. It is a hujjah. It has legal authority, legal force, legal weight. And not just issues of creed, but also issues of rulings, laws, injunctions, halal and haram. The hadith can be used to affirm Allah's names and attributes, issues of the last day, paradise, heaven, hell, the grave, qiyamah, etc. And it's also used in ahkam, in rulings. And the hadith is basically a refutation and a rebuttal of those who say that hadith is only used for laws. Hadith is only used for ahkam, but it cannot affirm a creed. It cannot affirm means of belief. This is the original purpose of the book. And the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, he gave this lecture, and he gave many other lectures on the topic, and wrote about this extensively in several of his works, because he lived during a time in which this was a widespread doubt and a big problem. There were people who said that you can't use hadith for aqidah, or hadith ahad, you can't use it for creed, you can only use it for rulings. And this is something that the Shaykh, walillah alhamd, he spent a great deal of effort and energy and time in fighting and combating this misconception and this widespread doubt. So this is a brief history of the book, an in-depth, or not in-depth, but it is something which is on the surface on why the Shaykh gave this lecture, why the lecture was transcribed and put together. Khairan, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that Shaykh Al-Albani, may Allah have mercy upon him, he was from those ulama of the 20th century who, there's no doubt about it, gave a great deal of time and effort and money and sacrifice to servicing the sunnah, to helping the sunnah, to supporting the sunnah, and spreading the sunnah, and reviving many concepts that were forgotten and abandoned. Okay, we said that Shaykh Al-Albani was from those ulama who did that. Or that's another topic in itself. Many people think that Shaykh Al-Albani was the only one who did this, and that's not right. That's not true. There's no disrespect to Shaykh Al-Albani, but that is inaccurate. There were other ulama who had the same movement and did many other services and works for hadith and the books of hadith and sunnah. But the thing which made Shaykh Al-Albani such a household name and such a popular figure, iconic figure of sunnah, of hadith, hadith science, grading, classifying hadith, was his da'wah. That Shaykh Al-Albani, he didn't just write books, he didn't just service the books of hadith or serve them, but he actually called to it openly, publicly. He was a person who had a voice with regards to sunnah, with regards to the way of the salaf, etc. So he gained a great deal of popularity because of his activity in da'wah, how active he was in da'wah. So this is one of the things which sets him apart from the other ulama of hadith who lived during his time, because there were other scholars in Africa, all right, other scholars in different continents, different parts of the world that did things that he did as well. But Shaykh Al-Albani, he had an edge, all right, he had an edge. And that's a whole topic or lecture in itself. We're not for extremism, or we're not for inaccuracy, no matter who's for or against. Anything that is inaccurate, we throw it out the window. Anything that is extreme, we do not accept. whether it's for or against someone that we love and someone that we're fond of. Khair, inshallah, is a very, very, very important point. Many people, they think that when it comes to the beloved scholars, the beloved ulama, that we can accept inaccuracies and we can deal with some things which may be extreme or wrong. No way, la. Something that's khata is khata. Something that is untrue is untrue. Something that is inaccurate, scientifically wrong, is scientifically wrong, no matter who it's for or no matter who it is against. And we are moderate and we are balanced in our love and our hatred for all. We are balanced. We're not extreme. We don't love people extremely, nor do we hate them extremely. Khair, inshallah. So let's get busy. Let's start off with the pros of the book. First and foremost is the uniqueness of the topic. Not too many books have this topic. And also the robust or the bold nature of the topic is clear, right, smack in your face. Hadith is a proof, is a dalil, al-aqidah and laws. Number two is the crucial importance of the topic and subject. Is crucial in the time in which the sunnah is attacked, in time in which the sunnah is misunderstood, in time in which the sciences of hadith are abandoned and neglected and looked down upon. And is even worse than that, like many books that we've studied and reviewed, people deal with hadith science that aren't truly qualified. People talk about the hadith science and they don't give it its due right. And that's even worse than the first category of people. Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Number three is the book deals with both defense and offense. In other words, the author, he brings doubts and he rebutes those doubts. He defends and he also attacks. He finds loopholes and inconsistencies in the attacker's claim, and he also defends the sunnah against what they say. Very important concept. You shouldn't always be on the defense, nor should you always be on the offense. It's a balance, 50-50, bitter, sweet, hot, and cold, okay? Another benefit is that the book, or pro, is that the book is written by a Muslim specialist. Not only is he a specialist, but he's a Muslim specialist. And the sciences of the Muslims have to be dealt with by the Muslims. And the sciences of the Muslims have to be dealt with specialists from among the Muslims. We have people who aren't Muslim who wish to deal with Islamic sciences, and we have people who are Muslim who wish to deal with Islamic sciences. How can a civil engineer or a cardiologist, a doctor, give a lecture and a talk on hadith in depth, in scientific depth? And he's went to school for 10, 15 years. He studied and practiced medicine. That doesn't make no sense. And these people, they would not allow us to talk about medicine. They would not allow people who deal with hadith to speak about engineering. They would say, no, be quiet, brother. Please, please, please. You're going to hurt someone if you build the bridge that way. You cannot make a building like this. We say similarly, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt others by talking about things that you have no knowledge of, let alone a science such as complex and in-depth and difficult and burdensome as hadith. So it's a huge pro for the book, in contrast to many other books that we find in the English language, even in the Arabic language, and the majority of the books that we've studied here on the channel, they're written by non-specialists, and that is a big problem. And we explained that before. Number five is the depth of the book. The book is very deep, and it speaks on various different aspects and angles. Number six is the abundance of citation of Quranic verses, prophetic hadiths, and statements of the people of knowledge from the past. It's not just one verse, two verse. The Shaykh gives you a slew of verses, 10, 20 verses. In every chapter, he gives you an abundance of dalil, abundance of hadith, abundance of statement. Ibn Qayyim, Ash-Shafi'i, fulan. And that's not dalil, as we said before. What Shafi'i said isn't dalil. What Ahmed said isn't dalil. But it is a benefit and it helps us in understanding and comprehending the dalil. So this is a big pro of the book. And we've said this before, any book that you want to write, you should have an abundance of proofs and evidences from the Quran and from the Sunnah. Not like some people who give lectures for an hour and they don't quote one hadith. They give a 30-minute khutbah and they only say one hadith. No. The next benefit we take, or the next pro of the book, is the abundance of examples. And the point that you're trying to get across to the listener or to the viewer or to the student, to the disciple, it only becomes clear in examples, abundant examples. Number 8 is the good organization and order of the book. Number 9 is the clarity of the chapter headings. Number 10 is the amount of respect given to the Sunnah and Hadith. Number 11 is highly informative. It has a very highly informative introduction to the book. Number 12, it deals with modern day issues. It's not just old ancient concepts, but new modern day concepts as well. Number 13, the book is very scientific. It's ilmi. It's not based off of what we call al-uslub al-khitabi or uslub al-tahwil. Okay, as people, they just preach and scream and holler and make big provocative claims and statements and verily and this athir and this person and fulan and la 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 la. It's ilmi. It is dealing with Allah, His Rasul, Hadith, Quran, Sunnah, Qala al-Shafi, Qala ibn al-Qayyim, Qala ibn Taymiyyah, fulan, fulan, fulan. It has science in it, knowledge. And not just how people who just talk and they make provocative claims and beware of these affairs, brothers, and la 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 la. That's what ignorant people do. They have no knowledge. They have very weak skills, so they have to talk to you and holler at you and scream at you and make these big and exotic words and talk with an English accent and a British accent to get their point across. That's not scientific. Those people, their knowledge is weak. And as the Arabs, they say, إِذَا ضَعَفَ بُرْهَانُهُ طَالَ لِسَانُهُ. They say when a person's argument is weak and feeble, his tongue is long. So I can't quote, I can't cite, I can't give you real knowledge, so I can insult you, I can curse at you, I can scream and holler, I can use all these big fancy type of words and exotic terminologies to make it seem like my lecture has content, but in actuality it has no content, it lacks content. The 14th bro is the small amount of typos, so alhamdulillah, it's not a lot of typos. Number 15 is a chapter on taqleed. The book gives us a chapter on taqleed, and this is very important, and we've spoken about this in several classes before on taqleed. Whether taqleed is permissible sometimes, whether there are some details, but the concept of taqleed is originally bad. Taqleed is originally negative. It's not something that's praiseworthy, as some people try to make it seem. The asl of taqleed is that it's madhmoom, it's looked down upon. And many of the ulama of the past have viewed the taqleed was haram, absolutely unconditionally haram. We made a chapter on this in our 40 hadith on seeking knowledge, the dispraise of blind following. So regardless of the details, is blind following permissible sometimes? Are there some Muslims who can blind follow? We say that the asl is that blind following is looked down upon, and it is not a praiseworthy thing, not like how some people try to make it seem, whether they're madhabis or whether they're sheikh worshippers. Listen to Sheikh Fulan, listen to Imam Fulan. Taqleed fil asl, the original ruling and understanding of taqleed is that it is looked down upon. I cannot quote how important this is. I cannot explain how important this is in words. Taqleed is not praiseworthy in the asl. It can become obligatory, it can become permissible, but it is not praiseworthy. It is not knowledge. It is not scientific. Taqleed is the emergency of the ignorant one. It's the emergency of the alim, and it is the staple practice of the ignorant, foolish one, the weak-minded person. It's the emergency of the intellectual. He has no option. He has no time. That's one thing. But the jahil, that is his bread and his butter. Taqleed. And what we mean by jahil is not someone who lacks information, but someone who's ignorant, his character, his behavior. He's a foolish person. He finds it okay to just worship men and take the statements and the views of men. So taqleed is blameworthy, and there are so many statements of the Salaf al-Salih with regards to taqleed and its dispraise. And it's very unfortunate we don't hear these lectures. We don't hear these talks. When we hear about the Salaf and the way of the Salaf and the ulama of the Salaf, we never hear what they say about taqleed. The only thing you hear is the Shaykh. Follow the Shaykh, listen to the Shaykh, the ulama, the scholars, the scholars, the scholars. But what do the scholars say about taqleed? Are we teaching the people? Are we educating the people? Are we trying to raise the bar for the people to educate themselves? Are we trying to get them to be sheeple, to be cows and cattle? That's a long topic in itself. Moving on. The cons or the sins of the book. Number one is a gross lack of basic information on the book's background. Not a lack of information, but gross lack of information. Who is the translator? What date was the book published? What's an original print? What is from the author and what is from the compiler? We can't even fully critique the book because we don't know exactly what Al-Albani said and what the translator, what he wrote. Or the Muhammad Eid al-Abbasi, what is from him and what is from Sheikh Al-Albani. We do not have 100% certainty or surety of what is what. And that's a huge problem. And understanding the book, benefiting from the book, most importantly critiquing the book, because we don't know whether Al-Albani said it or Abbasi said it. Who's to be taken to court? So that's a problem in itself. Number 2 is the mechanical English style used in translation in many places. The English is robotic and stiff and rigid. It's not fluid. Not all of the time, but in many places. We said not to be oppressive. Not all of the time, but in many places. And also another pro for the book is that the translation in many places, alhamdulillah, is good. It's valid. It's solid, authentic translation. But there's a difference, brothers and sisters, between valid translation and between the mechanical robotic style. They're not the same. I could translate something properly, but it's rigid. It's not fluid. It's not flowing. It doesn't mean that it's inaccurate. A good translation is one that is sound, is valid, and it's also has it's like a cup of water, you can drink it. All right. It's not something that is rigid and stiff. Number 3, the book is very technical in many places, which is unsuitable for the everyday Muslim. Not all of the time, but in many cases, the book can get very technical. Many issues of fiqh, usul al-fiqh, even hadith science itself, which is not suitable for the layman Muslim in every single place. There are some layman Muslims who are studious, who read more, they can benefit, they can ask questions, they can write things down. But every single Muslim is not going to be good to read everything in this book. Number 4 is some issues of controversy in the book in some places, and also some name mentioning, which is totally unnecessary. It's unnecessary for a person's name to be mentioned all of the time. All right. Sometimes it's permissible. We said sometimes it's permissible. Not like the ignorant people who say that just talk about Muslims and mention their names all of the time. No, that's not right. That's wrong. That's inaccurate. It is permissible out of necessity to mention a Muslim's name when warning from him or from his mistakes. Sometimes, yes, there's no doubt about that, based off of the authentic sunnah. But not every single time. And not as the people today, they have no piety, no righteousness, and they just talk about Muslims like dogs. Like it's nothing. He's a dog, he's a kalib, he's this, he's that, he's a deviant, he's going to the hellfire, so on and so on and so on and so forth. They have no taqwa with their tongues. That's wrong. So therefore, the asl of a Muslim is that his honor, and his blood, and his property is sacred. And that sacredness is not to be attacked unless there is something clear from kitab and sunnah, unless there is a need and a necessity. If there isn't a need, if there isn't a necessity, if it's not crystal clear from kitab and sunnah, the Muslim's honor is unlawful, despite what Sheikh Fulan says and what Sheikh Alan says. But the kitab and the sunnah tell us not to call each other names. The kitab and sunnah tell us not to backbite each other. The kitab and sunnah, they teach us to uphold the honor of our Muslim brothers and sisters. Khairan, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are some of, if not all, or the main cons or sins of the book. Now, let's deal with some notable quotes. Bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the remaining time that we have. Bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Firstly is page 33. It says here, Al-Khalaf, later generations judged the sunnah instead of judging with the sunnah. After the righteous generations came generations that ignored the sunnah of the Prophet and lost their grip on it. This happened because the later generations adopted rules and basics that some people of al-kalam, between parentheses philosophers, and some scholars of fiqh and usul, between parentheses those who established general rules comprised of numerous minor rules, adopted. As a result of these adopted rules, the sunnah, or at least a major part of it, was ignored and doubted. A part of the sunnah was even rejected because this part was in opposition to the general rules of that the Khalaf established. The ayah changed. Instead of referring to the sunnah for judgment, they did the opposite. They referred the sunnah to their own rules and regulations for judgment. Whenever their rules agreed, they accepted the sunnah. Otherwise, the sunnah was rejected. As a result, the strong ties between Muslims from among the Khalaf and the sunnah were severed. Muslims of the Khalaf have become ignorant in the messenger, his belief, seerah, life story, worship, fast, prayer, hajj, laws, and his legislative decrees. If these people are asked about any of the above, they will answer, or their answer will be issued based on weak or even fabricated hadiths. Or they may answer with a madhab, a school of thought and way of understanding the religion according to a certain scholar. If their answer is in opposition to correct hadith, and if they are reminded with this fact, they do not change their decision, nor do they accept to adhere to the truth because of some doubts that they raise, or because of their rules and regulations. We will mention some of these rules later on in this book, God willing. This disease that we have explained above has become widespread in the Muslim world today. It even touched the majority of religious magazines and books. Very few refer to the Quran and Sunnah when issuing fatwas. The majority depend on the four madhab. schools of thought of Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed. Occasionally, they refer to other than these four madhab for fatwa, but only for certain interests of the Muslim nation, so they claim. To these people, the sunnah has become a forgotten matter, unless this certain interest requires referring to the sunnah. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And indeed, Shaykh Al-Albani, he said that in 1972. What would Shaykh Al-Albani say if he came in 2015? The Shaykh would probably cry if he saw some of the ulama and some of the muftis and some of the mashayikh and the scholars today, let alone students of knowledge, let alone da'is. What would the Shaykh say if he lived in America and he heard some of the lectures and some of the khutbahs and some of the sermons of the people? Baseless fatwas, no kitab, no sunnah, no proof, no respect for the sunnah. Shaykh Fulan says you have to obey, you have to listen, you have to take the advice of the brothers. What would Shaykh Al-Albani say if he heard these people today? And they claim to follow his legacy. They claim to be Salafi. They claim to love Al-Albani. And Albani's in the east and they're in the west. Albani's in the ocean and they're in the middle of the desert. What would the Shaykh say? And this applies to so many other people besides people in America, UK, Australia, wherever you go. Okay? Fatwas that are not based off of the sunnah, no respect given to the sunnah, and the only light that's ever shed upon the issue is what the madhabs say. Abu Hanifa said this, Malik said that, Shaykh Fulan said this, Shaykh Al-Albani said that. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Next quote is page 74. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, Ibn Taymiyyah also said, until the point in which he says, one should not concern himself with the sayings of Ahlul Kalam. What we consider a unanimity or on a matter of religion is when this community of scholars of knowledge have a unanimity, also they approved and accepted. He says here, they have ijma' in matters of law. Is the ijma' of scholars of knowledge in this matter, and not of Ahlul Kalam, linguists or doctors of medicine. He goes on speaking or making a point that what is meant by what is agreed upon, what is there's ijma', what is an unanimous issue is what the ulama of knowledge, the ulama of hadith, what they say. In other words, the sunnah doesn't go back to philosophers and thinkers. The sunnah doesn't go back to orientalists. The sunnah doesn't go back to college professors and what they say and what they think. But what is agreed upon is Bukhari and Muslim, this and that. Bukhari and Muslim, their books, are they authentic, not authentic? The ulama of hadith, not what the orientalists say. Sunan Abi Dawood, Musnad Ahmad, Jami' Tirmidhi. Is the hadith a proof in itself? Is it not a proof? Do you have to refer back to the madhab? What do ulama of knowledge say? Not doctors, not people of medicine, not people of science. Okay? Very crucial point. We don't have enough time to shed all of the light on that. Page 109, the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, or maybe we have on something on page 93. It says, in summary, we say that taqlid is rejected and criticized. It is ignorance and not knowledge. True knowledge is the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah and gaining understanding in them. That is a gem, without a doubt. And last but not least, on page 109, we have a notable quote and also a controversial quote, which could be a pro, could be a con of the book. It says, establish the Islamic State in your hearts, and it will be established for you on your earth. Now, this statement was made by, we see here that Sheikh Rahimahullah, or maybe even the compiler, we don't know. He says, one famous Muslim preacher, he didn't call him a scholar, he said he was a preacher, who once said, establish the Islamic State in your hearts, and it will be established for you on earth. أقيموا دولة الإسلام في قلوبكم تقم لكم في أرضكم. It says, establish the Islamic State in your hearts, and Allah will allow it to be established in your land. In other words, believe in Islam, accept the Sharia, accept the Sunnah with your hearts, love it, respect it, embrace it, and most importantly, practice it. And inshallah, the Islamic State will be given to you. It will happen. It will be actualized. You'll realize it. So from one aspect, that is a very important statement. And there's so many Muslims talk about Islamic State, the Sharia, Islam, Khilafah, the Muslim Khalifa, so on and so forth. And they're from the furthest of people with regards to the Sunnah. They're like night and day when it comes to implementing the Sharia in their own selves, in their homes, among their wives and their children, their family members. They themselves, they don't accept the Sharia, but they want to establish and force others to accept the Sharia. That's a problem. But from another aspect, the statement is problematic. The statement is very problematic because a person can take the statement and say, well, Allah will establish the Islamic State and we just have to believe in it and that's it. In other words, there's no activism. In other words, there's nothing physical that you do. Just believe in it, have it in your heart, and it will just descend from heaven. Allah will just send it down and it will happen. You don't have to do anything but believe in it. That's wrong. And there are many Muslims who think and feel this way, unfortunately. They think that there's nothing for us to do. There's no physical action. Just, just believe in it. Or some Muslims say, when they look at the Muslims who are being persecuted and attacked and killed, they say, oh, well, they deserve this. They're getting killed by the non-Muslims because they deserve it. They're being sinful. Or look at them, they don't have beards, or their women have on pants. They're on the television. That's why they deserve to get killed. And that's wrong. Allah tells us to believe. Allah tells us to establish. And Allah also tells us to take action. Allah also tells us to be active, not to be passive, not to sit back and be complacent, but to strive, to fight, to move forward, to struggle, and not to just sit back and allow the oppressor to do whatever he wants to do. There is a balance. Now, you have to have sabr, you have to be patient, you have to try to be the best Muslim you can yourself, but you can't just say, if someone does something to you, says, oh, because I made this sin, so I'm not going to do anything. Would you allow someone to just walk up to you and slap you in your face and don't do nothing, don't say anything, and just say, oh, because I got angry last night, so that's why the person slapped me, so I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna do nothing. I'm just gonna allow him to take all my money and do whatever he wants to do because I'm a sinner. When the Islamic State is established, it still is going to be sin. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were people who made sin. There were people who were stoned to death for fornication. There were people who drank alcohol. There were people who stole. There were people who backbit each other. There were people who lied and did things that were wrong. So that is totally erroneous. And that is related and attached to the concept of al-irja'. Something we've spoken about many times and we've tried to combat and fight. This concept of iman is in the heart. Just believe in it. Don't do anything. Nothing that's physical in the deen. And that's wrong. So that statement is kind of a double-edged sword. It could be understood one way. It could be understood in another way. So, bidnillah, of course, if the Shaykh quoted that, then that's not what he meant it. That's not what he meant. Bidnillah. Bidnillah, he didn't mean it like that. But the statement itself needs further detail. All right? And it's a big problem that many Muslims have. We don't want to spend too much time on that. At the end, in brief, the book is a very good book. It's a very excellent book in Arabic and in English. If you get your hands on it, I would definitely advise you and recommend you to read it. The grade, we can't really give the book a grade because the book is originally in Arabic, but it's in English. The translation of the book, as we said, is pretty good, alhamdulillah. If I had to give a grade in English, I would say the book would deserve, let's say out of 5 quills, I would give it 4. 4 out of 5 quills is a good grade, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.